Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Strategy and Soul, the podcast with myself, Danikah Rose Creative. Today's episode is a little bit of a reintroduction, if you will. And the purpose of this episode is for a reminder, a permission slip, and a little bit of a message with some updates about what I've got going on. And I just really want to talk a little bit about failing forward and the mindset of what it takes for relentless focus towards a specific goal. And if anything's popped into your mind right now and you're like, it'd be nice to focus on that goal just that little smidge more, we're going to unpack that a little bit today. So, updates. My goodness, Danikah Rose Creative brand is approaching 2 years now. 2 years already. And I remember when I first started this business, oh my goodness, we were on the precipice of homelessness due to the rental crisis down in Victoria, Melbourne. We were 6 weeks away from moving interstate, and we had an 11-week-old baby who also had a just above 1-year-old brother, and my 2 other beautiful children, of course, and they're a little bit older. So, we've got like a big family. We have a lot of other projects that were closing out at that time, including a cafe that we owned during COVID down in Melbourne, which went really well. It was just not something that we needed to continue. And obviously, logistically, it wasn't really that possible because our intention was to come up here and move to Queensland. So, all that being said, the amount of inner work that's had to happen over that period alone and moving interstate, having left 2 of my children behind with their biological father and moving up here with my husband, it's been a very tender time in the last 12 months that has had a lot of evolution of myself and evolution within the business. And so managing and balancing out both of those as Danikah evolves as a person, and then I've also been evolving as a personal brand, it's been quite tricky to navigate. And I do not share a lot of this as content. It's not a core content pillar of mine to get all vulnerable and personal and talk about my family life. It's just not something that I've ever used as a main driver for any of the businesses that I've run over the last 15 years, including when I was working in corporate hospitality and managing multi-million-dollar companies for CEOs. It was never a thing that was necessary for me to inject. I'd always had this ability to separate. I desired that separation at those moments in my life, and it felt safer, in fact, to have those parts of my life compartmentalized. And I was operating in my masculine energy majority of the time. And even saying this out loud, all of that makes complete sense now as to why I desired to protect myself and not be as vulnerable. And while I do talk about authenticity, and everything that I share is from an authentic and a place inside of me that desires to be in the public domain and in the public content, there's also a lot of boundaries and restrictions that I had on myself. And it wasn't a chokehold. It wasn't me not being potent enough or loud enough or talking about stuff enough. It was just that there were parts of my life that I was filtering that I no longer desire to filter out in this phase of who I am now, as I've become more embodied in the Danikah Rose Creative brand, the personal brand aspect. And I really also desire to always make these episodes relevant to the listener. It's not just about me sitting here and telling my personal stories and letting you in on some behind the scenes BS about what a 6+ figure CEO is doing with her life, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that context is really important. And I also value, even for myself, that changing your mind and me changing my mind about the way that I present my core messaging and the things that I desire to share online have actually shifted. And I think it's about time that I go public with that, and it feels safe for me now. Was it always safe? No. There was a lot of transitions that had to happen moving into state. I grew up in Queensland, which is another state for those international listeners, and I moved away, and I spent 11 years growing into the woman that I am now without any family around. And I would come back and visit randomly. They would come and visit me, but it wasn't very regular. So I'd really grown up into this complete identity of who I was, and how I am, and what my values are now as an adult woman, and who I am as a mother, and my parenting style, and the value that I place on the natural birth process and the fourth trimester. And I could go on. There's so many parts that were connected even to me as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur, as a leader of my own life, is probably the best way that I can describe it from my heart, because I really led myself through a lot of things as soon as I'd left home at the age of 17. And growing up that quickly without your family being a part of the process, it's quite abrasive when you come back into that environment. And that's what I had to face when I moved up here. And so there was a lot of integration that was happening behind the scenes. And not only that, I've been expanding my capacity to hold. I've served over 50 women one-on-one in the last 2 years, which is just, the impact of that blows my mind. The way that I've seen people's lives completely change in front of my eyes just from spending weeks or months with me. I've known all along, since I was a really young child, that I had such a big message to share, and that the impact of everything I went through, and I even knew this as a child. I have a message. I have to help people. I'm here for the world. And even at the tender age of 7, maybe I didn't quite understand my psychic gifts, and I didn't really know why that was happening, aside from the broad idea that I'm meant to help more people. It's just become so much clearer to me. And after all the years of business and professional development and corporate life, and bringing that structure and that energy into what I'm doing now, combining it with my receivership and my ability to hold, it's not just about holding space for others also. It's about holding space for my own structure, for my family, for my desires, for all of these things that I've wanted to create. And I'm doing it. I'm living it. I'm breathing it every single day I wake up, and I'm like, well, how can I serve? Like, what do I feel like doing today? And I now have the freedom to choose, what do I feel like doing today? And not everyone has that luxury, and I never take it for granted. And without getting too like soppy and emotional, we can also talk about failing forward. I really, like, as I said, I want to add some value for you, for your own things that are going on for your life and your business. And sometimes there's this stop and start. There's a 1 foot in, 1 foot out energy that some people can carry. There's a, well, who would I be if I had all of the success and the money, and what would I even do with it once I get it? So I slow myself down and I make sure that doesn't happen. There's all these self-saboteur energies that can come into play. On the flip side of it is, what if it doesn't work out? What if people hate me? What if I lose everybody that I love? What if I don't know how to be that version of myself? So then all of the fear and all of those things can rear their head. And I don't even say ugly head, because they're just a part of the human psyche, to be always assessing and cross-assessing and analyzing our environment and deciding which is safe and which is not. And when we make a decision, and I really want to use this podcast as an example, I made a decision last year that I really wanted to start it, and I still absolutely did. And in that phase of my business, it was completely appropriate, because I had less clients. In fact, I had more time to be uploading and guesting and talking and writing captions and doing all of the things that are involved in the production of a podcast. And over time, that fell away. I ended up getting really busy really quickly, and being so experienced in business and burnout, which is my old self, I knew when I was on my edge. I knew when I was reaching that precipice of too much, Danikah, slow down. And so one of the first things that got removed and really eased off was this podcast, because it wasn't at that stage a main lead generator. It wasn't a strategic part. It was a heart-led part of my overall business plan. It wasn't that I was doing it to generate leads, for example. I wasn't trying to be the number one podcast in Australia, although, and internationally, hopefully, at one point in my life, that will happen. And it may be this podcast, it may be a different one, I don't know. And I'm still putting that out there in the universe. Thank you. Yes. But let's keep going. Like, did it fail? A couple of people said to me, oh, well, you never posted like some episodes that you said that you were going to, and you stopped recording, and like, where's the podcast? I've been waiting for the bell to ding. And I had a lot of subscribers really early on, a lot of downloads. It started to gain traction. So did my business. So did my bookings. So did my integrations and the amount of leveling up that I needed to do. It was necessary for me to focus on that so that I can be the best, highest potential version for my clients, for people that were paying me in that moment. And that became a priority above me doing a heart-led project that looked like the podcast. And so we move into a business blueprint where a 20K month is really easy. A 30K month is pretty normal. A 10K month happens all the time. This is how my business structure is at the moment. So for me to pay to delegate the podcast management to someone else has become really easy. That's something I can afford to do at this stage in my business, which means that the decision has changed. The script has flipped, so to speak, where I now can just sit here and I'll record something and then I'll pass that on to someone else to help me to get this valuable, free, amazing, heartfelt content that I desire for everybody to have access to. I desire for people to have access to me. And another part of this now being a bit more of a strategic podcast, just so you know, you're still going to get value. You're still going to get all of these tidbits and note taking and all of the things that you would come to expect from Danikah Rose Creative brand in general, because that's how I operate. It also will have an integration between my email list and the promos that I'm doing and the Strategy and Soul membership that's been launched. And it doesn't mean that I failed because I put a pause on it. What that actually meant for me was that I had the space and the capacity to grow into this version that now knows all of the exact things that I need to talk about to align with the dreamiest clients, the people that are going to listen to this and be nodding their head the whole time and going, oh, that makes sense. Oh, yeah, that was me once. Oh, okay, I understand that now. Oh, great, I can implement that tomorrow or today. Or when I finish listening to this podcast, I already know how I feel to move on to the next step. And those are all of my desires for the listeners and the watchers that are here on YouTube. If you're listening and you want to watch the video, it's on the YouTube channel. If you're on the YouTube channel and you just want to listen, it's on Spotify, Apple, Google, all the things. So it's, as I said, it's a bit of a reintroduction. It's a couple of updates. It's about me being another layer deeper of who I am as a person and integrating that into my personal brand and really showcasing what people are actually getting in one-on-one calls was slightly different than what you might be reading in my content. And the only way through to me, even at this present moment, is the DMs. It is sending me an email if you prefer email. And that for me, it's one of my highest values because I really adore when people put their foot in the door. I adore when you walk up and you knock on it and you say, hey, I'm here. How can you help me? What can you do for me? Hey, can you answer this question for me? That access to me comes through DMs. And I pray and I hope that that level of access doesn't actually change, because I know there's a lot of, maybe it will. Again, is it a failure if I say this in one podcast episode and then in 6 months' time when I'm making a lot more money and I have a lot more clients and my life changes a lot more, and then I just decide that I'm not going to be able to be talked to in the DMs? I don't know. But at this stage, that doesn't align with my values, and anybody that's listening is literally allowed and more than welcome to, and it is an open invitation that if you DM me, you can ask me anything. And if I tell you that, oh, that's a bit complex and I'm not answering that question for free, then that's just the boundary, because I know where my boundaries lie. I know what I like to talk about. I know how I like to help. And all of this knowing and knowing and knowing, oh my God, she knows everything. Like, I had to learn. I had to experiment. I wanted to. I got to do that. It's a freaking privilege. It's been a privilege that I also am very well aware that I have a husband. I have an amazing, incredible, supportive husband, and hats off to him. All the credit to him. Bless that man, because the space that he holds for me to even be confident enough to just say, yep, I'm allowed to have what I want. Like, it's not coming from nowhere. That me as a woman is at this supported, regulated, at peace, expanded, just like conscious. I'm so conscious, and I'm doing things with such intention because I have the ability and the space to do that. And just on the note of my husband, some people would know this story and a lot don't, because again, I didn't talk about this a lot publicly. And it was quite an overwhelming and very traumatic time when in July last year, just a couple of months into the podcast having launched and my business started to really pop off, I was still doing sales calls while my husband was in hospital recovering from a life-saving surgery. And all of that happened while I then was a solo parent all of a sudden for a good 6 weeks portion. The owner of the house that we were living in sold it and we had to move house. So all of this stuff has been happening, but it hasn't been a part of my content. Again, I'm not selling business strategy with the side of knowing everything about Danikah's personal life. I'm selling business strategy and psychic development and psychic strategy to you so that you can grow your business, so that you can create your legacy and your wealth pool for your children. Like, it's more that I'm focused on the results for my clients more than I'm focused on creating content that sounds relatable and that connects with the audience on a deeper level. That part feels manipulative, and it feels at times like people do that on purpose so that they can be more relatable and so that they can connect more. I don't want the fluff. And as I said, I still have made a decision, and it isn't coming from strategy. It's not coming from me wanting to manipulate my audience and make sure that I come across a certain way so that more people will buy from me. None of that. And I only make a decision when it's actually from my heart, that I desire to share these stories with you so that you can actually see what it is that I've been through in the last 2 years and why I'm the person that does help and that can help and that will help. Because I've been around the block. I've seen all of the shit. And then even just me personally, I deal with it. I handle myself. I talk to myself. I've created a really deep relationship with myself that's still deepening. And I wish and hope that it continues in that way, so that it also continues in a way that when I'm sharing this with you, it is intimate. Again, one of my highest values. I love intimacy. I love DMs. I love connecting. I love my community. I love my Facebook group. Join us if you are not in there. Conscious Business Creatives. Conscious Business Creatives. Because we're not just creating a business. It's not about being creative in all areas, but we are an artist of our life. We're an artist of our brands, whether you're serving product-based businesses and e-commerce or you own a cafe. It's still you in creation of your ultimate lifestyle, because owning a business is a lifestyle. Waking up every day and taking your kids to childcare or walking the dog at a certain time and making sure that you've also filmed a reel and that you know what your team is doing and that you get in the car and drive at a certain time because that's when the traffic is, and you're making all of these day-to-day decisions based on your ideal lifestyle. And if you're not, and you're like, oh, wow, actually, I feel lonely, or I feel restricted, or I feel like even being an entrepreneur isn't actually giving me that freedom, what is she even talking about? Then there's other questions that you need to ask yourself and be like, well, why am I not giving myself the permission? Which is a great segue, because I did want to touch on that today. The only person that can really give you permission is yourself. You are the one. Like, you're the one that's going to get the bag. You're the one that's going to delegate the tasks. You're the one that's going to be the driver. You are the one that's even hiring a strategist or a mentor or a business coach or whoever else you need to put in on your team. And let's be really clear, even when you're hiring a business strategist or a mentor, they work for you, not the other way around. So that's a bit of an empowerment piece there. I want you to step into your power and see if there's anyone listening here that has a different dynamic, and the power's outside of themselves, and the power's in the psychic, and the power's in the mentor, and the power's in the strategist and the consultant or the team, and you're relying on the team to CEO for you, that script gets to change also. And you get to see it from a different perspective and really be in ownership of your business, be in ownership of where your radical responsibility lies for moving your business forward and driving that vehicle towards the goal, towards the thing that you really, really want to have. And giving yourself permission is really one of the first steps. It's going to be one of the first things that you get to do as an entrepreneur, as a human being, whatever frequency you're on, whether you're like listening to this and feeling like, oh man, I have a long way to go, or you're listening to this and thinking, oh, well, that's kind of basic information. I already knew that. Either way, still continue to ask yourself the questions. Where can I give myself more permission to thrive more, to create more of a lifestyle that aligns with my highest purpose and my mission on earth and the way that I desire to see the world? And so whether you change your mind about something that you start and you don't want to do it anymore, or whether you are in a position right now where you're deciding whether you need to delegate more so you can have more of this freedom lifestyle, or whether you're, on the edge of a burnout, or there's something else that's going on for you as you've listened to this episode, that's the main thing that I'd love for you to take away from this. And just ask yourself, like, where have I shamed myself for perceived failure? Where have I created stories when I believed that because I failed, I needed to feel bad or guilt? I needed to feel angry or frustrated with myself for not being good enough, and forgive those parts and move on. Just allow the end of this episode to be the place where you've left that energy, and that we've created like a safe little bucket for everybody to just put their bullshit in, put your limiting beliefs into it, put your guilt and your shame and your anger and any frustration that you felt about not finishing a project or not starting the thing that you wanted to. And we're just going to place that frequency in that energetic bucket and literally turn off this episode and know that it's already done. That's my wish. That's what I would love. I would love for you to understand about yourself that you're the one. You're the one that gives yourself permission to make all of these amazing decisions that you get the privilege to make. You have the privilege to decide and to create and to step up and to be more and to allow that evolution of who you are without perceiving things as failing when they might not go the way that you would have wished and hoped and planned. And I'm going to end the episode there because I feel like that's enough. That's enough. And you're enough. And everything that you're doing is more than enough. And as long as you can literally go to bed every single night and lay your head on that pillow and say, you know what, I did my best. I've done my best. And if you didn't, you're going to forgive yourself. And then you're going to wake up the next day and say, get it, girl. You're doing your best. Today's the day. We're doing our best. What's the best thing I can do for myself today? So I'll love you and leave you. There's no set call to action. The only thing I can say is listen in more, because this is going to get a lot deeper than how I actually anticipated Strategy and Soul podcast to be. And I've changed my mind and I'm ready to share more. And I'd love to share that journey with you and that energy with you. So take care, and we'll see you next time on Strategy and Soul, the podcast.